Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today and we are diving deep into the Bungie situation. Naturally, as I'm sure you've already heard, the studio has been hit with massive layoffs, but that's only the start of all the problems that are happening over at Bungie and how it connects to PlayStation and what has been multiple scathing reports about the company. I mean, it's a lot. And so we're going to go through all of it today. I appreciate many of you who have been requesting my thoughts on this topic with how many opinions have been tossed around on this subject. I'm sure you've heard enough of it already, but thank you for tuning in. If you're new here and you're into the latest and greatest or worst in gaming, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing. So I just want to start off at the top with how I feel about the way Bungie has handled Destiny 2, just to solidify where I stand as a player of their games versus the company itself. So when it comes to Destiny 2, I only played it about 10-15 hours, which I know maybe isn't enough to develop a full opinion on the overarching story going across multiple expansions, but for me, I could not get into it at all. This is one of the least beginner-friendly games I've experienced in my entire time as a gamer, and I'm surprised how popular it is with that onboarding experience being as terrible as it is. I also noted that for a free-to-play game, this isn't very free-to-play. I know Bungie's got to make their bones, and I'm totally understandable of that, but I was not crazy about how literally every single layer of this game is completely monetized from top to bottom. At a certain point, it gets into that territory of, I would rather just pay for this and be done with the whole thing. I also take great umbrage with the way they vaulted out story content. Again, as a new player hopping in, I was trying to get into what everyone's been raving about with, Witch Queen and all these great stories that are being told. And I'm like, all right, let's see what that's all about. And I couldn't get any real context. I'd have to go onto YouTube or read wiki pages to get that context that's no longer playable just because. And so I found a lot of those decisions controversial, and that stinks because the art direction, music, and the shooting was fantastic. I loved how the game played, and I could see why people have gravitated towards it. With that said, Bungie gave birth to one of my favorite shooter series of all time, Halo. One of my favorite first-person shooters ever is Halo Combat Evolved. I just love the mission-to-mission vibes. I talked about this in our Halo Infinite video, so I won't get too redundant here, but I absolutely adore the Halo series, and a lot of the talent that is responsible for that series stayed with Bungie all the way through up until Destiny 2, but sadly, for some, that has changed. And so with that, the only message I really have to start things off is 343 should be picking up the phone. They already have some great talent there, and now you could poach some from Bungie to fortify Halo further. I think that sounds like a pretty good opportunity to take advantage of and put some people who are unfairly bounced out of the company into a proper place. But let's talk about what exactly has happened, shall we? So naturally, it starts off with a report from Jason Schreier of Bloomberg, where we'll read a couple of snippets here and then get into the rest of it. Bungie's decision to cut an estimated 100 jobs from its staff of about 1,200 followed dire management warnings earlier this month of a sharp drop in the popularity of its flagship video game Destiny 2. Just 2 weeks ago, executives at Sony-owned game developer told employees that revenue was running 45% below projections for the year, according to people who attended the meeting. This is already a number I've seen a lot of reading into, and I just wanted to give my 2 cents on this to start things off, which is there is a difference between revenue generated and profit made, and it is possible that Bungie did not anticipate the type of year that 2023 was going to be and thought, oh, we're going to keep sustaining that player count, even with Lightfall being what I've heard is a complete miss on a narrative front, which is one of the main hooks for Destiny, and that's sort of what made people start leaving in waves, even though follow-up seasons had apparently made some sort of a recovery here. But when you see such a big miss there, you got to imagine that Bungie was looking at what they were doing and thinking they were going to maintain that even amongst all the competition. And it's a tough year to be a live service game because it's just one of those years where if your game's not stellar, you're getting missed. And you got to look at something like what happened with Immortals of Avium. That game wasn't terrible. I said it could have been so much better in my review, and they had layoffs there because many people just don't have time this year for a 7 out of 10 game. It's just not that kind of year when you're getting 9s and 10s everywhere, and these games are living up to the hype. So I think with Bungie missing Lightfall and tapering off, they had a revenue projection that was likely something they thought they could sustain, and they missed far and below that. What that means internally in the terms of profit and company sustainability, we do not know. We're not privy to that information, but missing by that much, make no mistake, is an extremely sizable gap and would hurt pretty much any company on planet Earth significantly if they didn't have such a rich parent company. So they do have that fallback option there. Continuing on with the report here, the next expansion, the Final Shape, was getting good, not great feedback, and management told those present that they planned to push back the release to June 2024 from February to make sure that the product would get additional time to improve. Because now the situation they're in with Destiny 2's player count declining is, many people are saying, like, if you don't get Final Shape right, that's it for Bungie. And man, that's tough to imagine. I don't know if I'm quite there yet because they have so much else in development. We'll talk about Marathon, we'll talk about Matter later in the video. I don't know if I'm quite there yet that this is going to be the end of Bungie, but it may mean that the wrap up for Destiny 2 may get accelerated quite a bit. So they do absolutely need to nail Final Shape, no doubt about it. Employees who were let go will receive at least 3 months of severance and 3 months of Bungie's paid Cobra health insurance, although other benefits such as expense reimbursements ended Monday, sending some staff racing to submit their receipts. Laid off staffers will also receive prorated bonuses, although those who were on a vesting schedule following Sony Group Corp's acquisition of Bungie in January 2022 will lose any shares that weren't vested as of next month. This is where it gets really skeevy, because there were a lot of people who are about to get a massive payout pretty much because of that Sony acquisition, and now those shares are going to return to Bungie because Bungie needs those shares, and no doubt they're going to start hiring people again with that money they have now got back. The problem is, as we're going to get into, as I'm sure you've already heard, is the people that they have let go. It couldn't have been, in some cases, a worse choice. There are still Bungie mainstays available at the company, but you got dudes like Michael Salvatore, who was a part of the duo with Marty O'Donnell back in the Halo days, like composing one of the most iconic video game soundtracks. You get Michael Salvatore laid off. You have the woman who designed the Halo logo, some of the most iconic box art, some of the most iconic branding in gaming. She got laid off. I mean, I imagine part of this initiative at Bungie was to lay off extremely expensive people to retain, because it was either them or maybe 10 other people. Is that how they weighed it out? But when you look at the people who were there, who made Bungie this prominent shooter figure in the industry, this historical studio, to let them all go is the equivalent of what we saw happen at BioWare, where the talent that made that era from around 2003 to 2012 so special, like Drew Karpyshyn, Casey Hudson, and so on and so forth, have all fled the studio, and they're all working on their own separate projects. Like Casey Hudson just announced Humanoid Origin as their team, and they're working on a new sci-fi RPG, it looks like, very much inspired by Mass Effect. So you see these types of things happening across the entire industry, which is the blessing and curse of gaming. You know, you have these other opportunities that are being created and new studios propped up, but the nostalgia factor, the love, the adoration that was created by a certain company like Bungie with Halo, with that talent there, and it's not being fostered, it's not being invested in, is heartbreaking to many, because what made these games special were the people who were fighting to make the game great. And there was apparently internal bouts ongoing on how to win players back on Destiny 2, and those were the people who got let go, not the managerial figures who are making really bad decisions. No, the people who are in the trenches fighting, which has again been the story all year. It's been a historically great year for video games, but it's been really bad to work in video games. Now, you could make the argument, and I think it would be fair, that there are more people working in video games than ever, just given the sheer studio count, the amount of investments being made. This is a random example, but I think of this JRPG title, Eternites, that came out. It was apparently a solid game. I never checked it out. It didn't review spectacularly well, but a Korean publisher invested like 7-8 million into that company. Now they're more than a one-man team. They're hiring. So you're seeing a lot of money still being poured into the games industry, but it's starting to equalize where companies are like Bungie are even being flattened out. And what's most interesting is when PlayStation went out to acquire Bungie, they paid almost $1 billion more to ensure that talent was retained. And the reason for that is Sony, as a company, was looking to get into live service, as we've covered many times here on this channel, and they needed the expertise of Bungie, who's seen the highs and lows of live service throughout all of Destiny 1 and Destiny 2, from Taken King to Witch Queen to Lightfall. Like, oh, these are all lessons that they've learned to help guide them to the next step forward. And it gets even crazier. I was against this already when the story broke out, that Bungie had taken a look at factions reportedly and said like, nah, that ain't it. and that Naughty Dog had to change what was happening with factions based on that feedback. I find that insane because while I was not crazy about The Last of Us Part 2, and I'm not the biggest diehard fan of Uncharted, I really do just truly love The Last of Us Part 1, but I also love Jak and Daxter. But point being is Naughty Dog is another historically talented studio, and to have the new family member come in and say, you do it like this, and try to tell them what's up, when, by the way, Naughty Dog's made really good multiplayer experiences. I think of Uncharted, I think of course, The Last of Us Part 1 with its factions mode, which was so much fun, and you have Bungie coming in, calling the shots now, but you look at how they're handling their own business. Was that really the right call to lean into that, I put it in quotes, expertise? I had said from the get-go, like, bad idea. I don't like that idea at all. I think that Naughty Dog's earned the right to do what they want, to give it a shot because of how successful they are. So to see that sort of overruling was kind of scary, and now we're seeing how it's playing out for Bungie. Still got a little bit more to go here. The final quote in this article is, layoffs are part of a larger money-saving initiative at Sony's PlayStation unit, which has also cut employees at studios such as Naughty Dog, Media Molecule, and its San Mateo office. And I know a lot of Xbox fans have leapt on this and weirdly made this a console wars talking point. I'm just going to say that I totally see this in Microsoft's future at one point or another. With how many studios they're acquiring, they cannot sustain all of them. And with every single bit of consolidation, you get a lot of layoffs of, I put it in quotes, trimming the fat. But in the case of Bungie, the reason it's getting so much attention is they're letting go key players that made their games as special as they were. And not that they're retaining poor talent, although according to Pete Parsons in a leaked internal memo, he said we kept the right people, which is just like, you just don't say that, dog. Don't say that, dude. Like, come on. You know, so he's like, yeah, we kept the right people, but many would say otherwise. And so the question being, before we get into Bungie's official response on the matter, is Matter screwed? Is Marathon screwed? And I still have confidence in Bungie as a talent. And I'm personally excited for a new start for them in these IPL, though I know Marathon's resurrecting an old 90s game for them, but I'm excited for it because I feel that Destiny 2 has just been warped by monetization so much that for me, as someone who, I remember the hype of Destiny 1, seeing, I think it was what, New Old Russia, whatever it was called, that first level, right? Which it was kind of hilarious to find that again in Destiny 2, but hopping in, seeing that hype, that anticipation for Destiny 1, and I was not crazy on what Destiny 1 did and bounced after about 30 hours with the game and just moved on to other things like, what was Shadow of Mordor? 2014 was an awful year. But Bungie's live service pursuit just never resonated with me, and I'm happy it did for others, but I'm keen to see what they do without being mired in complete monetization, a fresh beginning, not desperately changing the business model to catch a new wave. I'm very excited for that, so I have a little more optimism on that front as a new player entering in. But also, for all Destiny 2's faults, it always goes back to these games don't feel bad to play at all. But it goes deeper for many Destiny players. I mean, for some, they want the PvP experience tweaked, which Bungie has gone on and ignored ad nauseum, which I know has been a big problem there. So how are they going to treat a game solely based around PvP? It does feel like they're a bit stretched thin, so maybe my optimism is a little misfounded. Certainly now's not a good time to be optimistic, but I don't think this spells the end of these projects and that they're going to be bad. They still have a lot of talent there and a lot of good people there. It's just that they let go of like key players. Like again, Michael Salvatore is just, that is freaking mind-blowing to me. So their official response, they posted on their website today as we record this video, our path forward. This has been one of the most difficult weeks in our studio's history as we've parted ways with people we respect and admire. We've spent this week supporting one another, including those who are at the studio, as well as friends and colleagues who no longer are. We want to acknowledge the feedback and concerns that you have about Lightfall in recent seasons, as well as your response to the reveal of the final shape. We know we have lost a lot of your trust. Destiny needs to surprise and delight. Why is everyone using this term nowadays, man? Phil Spencer started this wave, I swear. We haven't done this enough, and that's going to change. To us, the path forward is clear. We need to make the final shape an unforgettable Destiny experience. We want to build something that will be regarded alongside the best games we've ever made, a fitting culmination that honors the journey we've been on together for the past 10 years. Forsaken, the Witch Queen, and the Taken King, these are the standard bearers we aim to live up to. When you think about that versus the volume of expansions they've put out, it's kind of a hilarious ratio, but continuing on, we are intensely focused on exceeding your expectations for the final shape. Destiny 2 has more than 650 dedicated teammates pouring all their energy and expertise into delivering this epic moment and its subsequent episodes. In the weeks ahead, you'll be hearing more from us about what's next on the short-term horizon, beginning with our next season in late November. However, afterwards, we'll begin to unpack our team's bigger, bolder, and brighter vision for the final shape, as well as the bridge we plan to build to take us all out of this darkness and into the light. See you, Starside, the Destiny 2 dev team. So, they haven't denied what was also reported, which is that the final shape is being delayed, as we talked about earlier, to June of next year, which I think suggests that, as expected, it's going to be true. I think the general takeaway here is this. Look, I think of the team right now working on these seasons, which, by the way, if Halo Infinite is anything to go off of, the fact that they're going to delay the next expansion, which means these seasons are going to stretch on a bit longer, Bungie is in for a rough time. Like, it's not just going to end here. Okay, let's begin the recovery and continue onwards. Like, they're going to be in for a bumpy ride until final shape hits, because that long season fatigue is going to hurt them. But more than anything, my biggest takeaway is this, and maybe I should have said this earlier because I know how YouTube works and not everyone sticks for the full video, but if Bungie is going to send this message to their team that even though you have worked at the company, let's take Michael Salvatore as an example, 20 plus years, that you've worked here, and the courtesy you get on the way out is an overnight notification, hey, we have a meeting, and you get let go. Some people getting let go over email, over text. If this is the message you plan on sending to your talent, even if you are a long-term player in the team's success, that says that no one is safe. And no one is going to feel safe. That's not going to encourage the best work, but more than anything, for a team that undoubtedly is going to try to hire again, that says to the people coming into the industry that they are not safe at your company. And I've said this before, that if you work in a creative field, that your job is never truly safe, as right now the industry is trying to unionize to change that. But in a creative field, those jobs have never been safe. And that's not to make excuses for Bungie, it's just a matter of fact. However, if there are people who have earned job security, which I think the list is pretty short, I think of other figures in the industry, you think of Todd Howard, like you can't let Todd go. You think of Hideo Kojima, you can't let Kojima go, right? Unless you're Konami and you're really stupid. But point being is, you look at these companies out there, right? And how they have these small short lists of people that you just can't let go because they're fundamental to the current success of those teams. And when you let those people go in the manner you did, you send a poor message not only to the current talent that it's time to probably start looking elsewhere, right? It's probably time to start finding work elsewhere where you may be just a modicum more safer, where you might not just get booted out last minute. But also, as a company that really postures up taking care of people, we don't need to get into Bungie's extremely performative approaches to social media that ring hollow with anyone with a brain cell. And look, I'm all about supporting different people, different walks of life. I think it's great. I just think a lot of these companies are full of shit, if I'm going to tell you how it is. And when you see how they treat their own people when push comes to shove and their backs are against the wall, the right people didn't take the pay cuts. The right people didn't make the choices that they needed to sustain this company. They chose to protect themselves, get rid of the people who worked hard to communicate problems with the game, to fix the game, and now it's sink or swim time for them. And so this just shows exactly what every company is, but especially Bungie, and you should take heed of that, whether you're just a bystander, an onlooker, or you're someone who's working directly in the industry. That's all I got for you, ladies and gentlemen. So let me know your thoughts on this Bungie situation down below. Take excellent care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.